Hey everyone, I'm Jessica. By now most of you have probably heard about Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy, a remastering of the original PS1 games, Crash Bandicoot, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, and Crash Bandicoot 3 Warp. This is your typical remastering, where they had a fresh coat of paint, and put the game on the most recent console. I mean, that's kind of what they did. Graphics have been totally redone. Tweaks to the game have made it more modern day friendly, while still remaining true to the originals. This is a game I've been excited for ever since I heard it was coming. Honestly, it was never something I expected to be announced. And it'll also be my first experience with Crash 2. I just did a review of the original Crash Bandicoot, so check that out if you haven't. So with that playthrough still fresh, will N Sane Trilogy feel better and more refined? Or will it just feel dated? Well, let's get started. I'm not gonna get real into the story of Crash Bandicoot. Objective of each game? Stop Cortex, and stop Uka Uka, along with Cortex. Dr. Cortex is essentially the Dr. Wily of Crash Bandicoot. I will mention a couple very slight alterations to the story, where when Tawna gets captured, she initially fights off the guards, giving her just a little bit of personality she was missing, instead of being completely helpless. And upon reaching the end of a bonus level in Crash 1, Tawna will get captured instead of just standing there in the middle of a tree. It's a nice little detail. Spoiler alert, she still vanishes after Crash 1. Graphically, Crash Bandicoot had a major overhaul. This game went for a more realistic look in terms of surroundings and lighting, while still maintaining its cartoonish qualities. I was a little worried that the game was gonna look washed out. Even though Crash doesn't pop out as much as the PS1 games, I think they did a great job. Tempo levels were an issue for me last game, being dark and gloomy. Depth perception still not the best, but this time they had a nice warm sensation emitting from the light sources, changing the entire feeling of the level. I have to say, during Night Flight in Crash 2, where a small firefly is your light source, it looks absolutely fairy tale-like. The sound effects are still as satisfying as ever. Spinning one enemy into another, that's a great feeling. The music's also been revamped, each track getting a slight remix of the original, which for the most part sounds great. I do miss the original Up the Creek track, but this one is okay. You have the option to play as Coco for the majority of the game, and just like Crash, has some of the most amusing idle animations. Let me say right off the bat that saving is no longer an issue in Crash 1. You can save anywhere on the map, or warp room if you're playing Crash 2 or 3. Thank goodness. There's also an autosave feature, which actually saved me once because I accidentally loaded my data instead of saving. Thankfully I had a backup thanks to the autosave feature, but seriously, who puts the save button on square and load on X? It is nice to have the option of playing as Crash or Coco, though they are exactly the same, just different skins of each other. So disclaimer, even if I say Crash, it's referring to both of them for simplicity's sake. Immediately when I began the game, Crash's weight felt different than the original. Crash feels heavier, and you really need to hold down the jump button to maximize the height of his jump. Generally it's not too much of a problem, but it did cause me to die on a lot of jumps that I thought I was gonna make. In Crash 2 and 3, you have the slide available to you, providing more room for error, so deaths felt like they were more my fault, while jumps were much tighter in Crash 1. The high road was an issue in itself, being much more difficult than the original game. I actually ended up making a guide for it if you want to check that out. In the high road, the turtles just feel unreliable, and you immediately begin jumping if you walk on them, unlike the original game, making it harder to properly align yourself. Coupled with the changes to Crash's weight, just makes for a dreadful time. Some enemies were changed for the better. One of the enemies I disliked now pushes you back to the previous platform you were on, and isn't so much of a jerk. In Crash 1, checkpoints now save the boxes you've previously broken, and bonus levels can now be replayed immediately on unlimited number of attempts. Time relics have been added to Crash 1 and 2, adding to the potential playtime. Crash 1 doesn't feel that great if you try to factor in speed. There's a lot of stop and go just waiting for certain hazards, unlike Crash 2 and 3 where the level design just suits something more fast paced. I'm perfectly fine with saying Crash 2 and 3 have superior level design to Crash 1, not just the platforming levels, but hog levels compared to the polar bear and Puddle levels, and you can see how much better the gameplay gets after the original. The Puddle levels are my favorite in the series, by the way. Look at that speed. And they say Sonic has to go fast? Something that was bothering me was the momentum you get in underwater levels. Every time you turn your character, they will swim slightly in that direction, which caused some undeserved deaths in tight spots. The bosses are overall pretty easy, but get a bit more interesting as the games progress. Just don't get too excited and die to the boss after you beat them like me. I really like the fight with Engine in Crash 3, just cause it feels like a Star Fox boss. Motorcycle levels in Crash 3 are still as stiff as ever, but it wouldn't be a Crash 3 game without them. Wouldn't it be great if we got a new Crash Team Racing though? The answer is yes, by the way. Yes. Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy is a remaster that does it right. The graphical overhaul looks great. Tweaks for the most part fix some glaring issues, while still remaining true to the original gameplay, even though I still think the originals have their own nostalgic qualities to them. Unless you're going for that authentic feel, N Sane Trilogy is probably the best way to play the games now. especially Crash 1. For a newcomer, I would suggest starting with Crash 2. In terms of difficulty, I would rank them from easiest to hardest, Crash 3, 2, and 1. It would be great to see them remake Crash Team Racing, or maybe even a Spyro game, or 3. We'll just have to wait and see. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.